Today we check out another option you have for a direct mainboard replacement on your Ender 3 from Panucatt, the Kinetica G2-C. If you've never had an opportunity to use something made by Panucatt, they have a couple of different mainboard options, some LCD screens, a Wi-Fi and Ethernet module, but they're all made to be used around your CNC or your 3D printer. And in my opinion, they're pretty high quality devices, and the Kinetica G2-C is no exception. It's made to be a direct swap out mainboard for your Creality Ender 3. So in general, this is what you're going to get when you order your G2-C. You can see it's pretty similar to the Ender 3 layout, but it does have a Wi-Fi chip on it by default. You can also order an Ethernet chip so you can use a cable if you want, and it also includes a Wi-Fi antenna if you want to work that into your configuration. The board has 4 integrated 2209 stepper drivers, so it will be nice and quiet. The processor chip on this one is a SAM 4S8, so an Atmel 32-bit processor, plenty of power there. The LCD connection on this one is actually pretty clever. They give you this adapter board so that you can use your Ender 3 or CR10 style screen, the one with just one cable, but you can also take it off. So you also have your EXP1 and 2 connections, so you can use your regular screens, like your discount screen or your full graphics screen. So that's a really handy feature. You can also remove this Wi-Fi adapter to use your Ethernet adapter as well. It has your standard fan connections as well as end stops. You do have one PWM fan, one constant fan, and then another fan over here that you can use for hot end. This one will be for part fan. We'll see that more in a second. You have servo pins that you can use for your BL Touch. You have your auxiliary pins. You have transmit and receive available right here, so you can use those for different devices, as well as some pins labeled probe. But 3.3 volt is available over here if that fits your configuration. So lots of different pins to play around with. As well as all of the traditional pins that you see on Panucatt devices, these pins will support the VIC-2 controller. It's an advanced controller that they have designed. But you can also use these for a couple of other things. To go along with all the features, a lot of the different components that are on these boards are a lot higher end than some of the boards you'll see out there. It has a lot larger MOSFET to support the bed, as well as a little higher grade of MOSFET for the fan and the hot end. I can't really see the numbers all that well, but I can get you those model numbers if you'd like. And always good to see you have an automotive style blade fuse to protect the board. Just an all-around pretty good setup. And this board, there's one thing that it brings to the table that might interest a lot of people, and that's the fact that it runs RepRap firmware. And you know what that means? That means you can use the Duet DWC. This is my tool changer, but this is what it looks like. The Duet web control is very straightforward. It functions over Wi-Fi or Ethernet. It's easy to edit your RepRap configuration because you can go into settings and edit those files on the fly. And you don't need Octoprint. You can do everything right here. Of course, you still can use Octoprint if you want, but this makes it super convenient to use your 3D printer. And you don't have the limitations a lot of Wi-Fi modules will when dealing with files and shifting things around. And that, in my opinion, is what sets this board apart from a lot of the other replacement boards for your Ender 3. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through all the steps, swapping out this board onto our Ender 3. I do have an E3 Mini SKR board on it right now. And then we're going to take a look at how the Duet controls the Wi-Fi module on this board and just see how things work out. So let's get into the install. I have removed my SKR board from my Ender 3, and we're going to start by putting on the power wires because I think it's easier to put the power wires on before you mount the board. These boards do mount just like the stock Ender 3 board. We have our power in terminal right back here. Positive is on the inside, negative is on the outside edge of the board. Now that the power's on, I'll just go ahead and slide this in. I'm going to use the stock screws that come with the Ender 3 to mount it. The board fits in the stock location, no problem at all. There are 4 screws, one up here, one kind in the middle, one back here, and then one back here in the corner in between those 2 motor plugs. Now we'll start to get everything wired up and we'll just work our way around the board. This first set of lugs right here is for your hot end fan. These are always on. You do have a 0 and 1 over here. I believe you could probably change that connector over and control it. I'm not exactly sure how RepRap does that at the moment, but we can take a look at that a little later. But for now, I'm just going to put my hot end fan on these 2 lugs. Positive for the fan goes on that side, negative on that side. Next up, we have your heated bed wires. A lot of these beds are not polarized, so it doesn't matter positive or negative, but some of them they do. This side is positive. Make sure you get these tied down good. And this side is negative. Next, we have the lugs for our heater cartridge for our hot end. This one, it does not matter which wire goes where, but the first one is positive. Hot end heater wires are on. Now we'll move to some of the end stops and the fans. This plug right here is a case fan. That's always on if you'd like to use it. The one right next to it, this one right here, is your X end stop. The one above that, this one right here, is your Y end stop. And you guessed it, the one above that is your Z end stop. This one up here is listed as an A stop. You can probably use that for a filament sensor or something, just some extra pins that you could use. As I said before, this plug is listed as a case fan, so that's going to be always on. The one above it is fan 0. I'm going to plug my part fan in there. And the one above that is listed as fan 1. I believe that is PWM controlled, so you can set it with G-code commands. We'll test that after we get everything up and running. Our bed thermistor gets plugged in right here. And then right next to that, that's where your hot end thermistor gets plugged in. Moving on around, your stock Ender 3 screen, the nub on the back of that plug will go towards the back of the printer. On your expansion port right there. And then we plug in all the motor wires. The back corner up here is the X motor. Next one down is the Y motor. The next two down, these are for Z motors. This is just in case you have the dual Z upgrade or you want to use that with this board. You can use whichever one you like. I'm just going to use this first one right here. And then finally, our last motor connection right here will be your E motor. And we're all wired up, ready to power on. We are powered up, there was no smoke, so that's a good sign, but you'll notice our screen is blank. Now mine did come with a touch panel that we're going to talk about in a second, so the firmware that I'm running might not be configured to use a stock display. That's easy enough to fix. If that happens to you, then you'll know how to do it. We'll walk through that in just a second. I'm not exactly sure how the stock configurations on these boards are set, but hopefully it's set just plug and play with your Ender 3. But again, it's not a big change. Also, you'll notice you just have the red light on your Wi-Fi module down here. That's because it doesn't know how to connect to your wireless internet, so you will have to set that up no matter what. And we do that by cabling in USB. So let's go ahead and get our Wi-Fi set up so we can make some configuration changes, and then we can get our screen working. So the printer's powered on, I'm cabled up USB, and I would usually use Pronterface to control a printer, but on Duet, it seems to like another type of terminal editor. That's because of how Pronterface handles spaces. If you use Pronterface, you would have to escape certain characters for Duet to be able to understand it. So Duet recommends you use yet another terminal. And it is free to download. I'll leave a link in the description, but we'll just open it up. It should know what port you want to connect to and connect up automatically. It will probably ask you if you'd like to connect if it doesn't, but we just need to get the Wi-Fi set up. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look and see what firmware we have installed. We're going to do an M115. This does state that it is specific firmware for the Kinetica G2, so the version has been altered a bit just to fit this machine. Just be aware of that. We're going to do an M552 to check the state of the Wi-Fi module. It is currently disabled. We will put it in idle mode with M552 space S0. Wi-Fi module has been started. You can check it again with just an M552. It will now say idle. And now we can set up our wireless network name and password. You want to do M587, capital S, and then in quotes, your wireless network name. Remember, these are case sensitive. And then capital P, and in quotes, your password. Make sure you get this right. We'll hit enter. Then after your wireless and password information have been entered, we can enable that module, M552S1. And then after a couple of minutes, it'll come back with an IP address on your wireless network that our printer is connected at. Mine is 192.168.1.56. So wireless is set up, we should be all set there. And there's one other important thing about Duet devices when you're using RepRap firmware. The web interface that you connect to lives on the SD card on the board. If we head over to the Panucatt site and we head to support and to the Kinetica support files, you have your wiring diagram as well as the SD card information. We can download that, and we'll just head to downloads and we'll extract all, and then everything that's in that zip file will go on your SD card. Again, this is all of that web UI information. So we can grab all this, we'll just right click and copy. I have my SD card formatted FAT32. We can just paste all these files right in here. Now you can mount that SD card on your board and reboot. And because we restarted to load this web UI, we're going to have to bring up that Wi-Fi interface again. It's already configured. You don't have to add your information in. You just have to start it. After we get up and running, we'll put that in the config file so it starts it every time the printer boots. But we'll just jump back over to YAT and run an M552S1. Wi-Fi module has been started. There's our IP information. We'll go back to our browser. If we go to 192.168.1.56, here's our DWC for our Ender 3. You can see it's pulling in all the right thermistor information. That's a good sign. We're going to have to make a few configuration changes. Let's go to Settings. We'll go to System Editor. And we'll head to config.g. And this is what a lot of people like about the RepRap firmware and the Duet interface. You can just make changes in these files and kick it over, and then they'll be saved on the board. You don't have to recompile every time. It pulls all this in every time it boots. And that's really attractive when you're considering a main board. It's a lot easier than trying to go through and compile Marlin and upload it every time. That's attractive to a lot of users, so consider that when you're looking at boards. There's already a line in here to do our M552S1. So let's just take the semicolon off of that. So now it will start our Wi-Fi module every time it boots, so that problem's taken care of. And if you scroll on down to the bottom, and in the middle of that, I got a JavaScript error. I don't know if this is my version of Java causing this or my browser, but it does seem to work on Microsoft Edge. But Chrome, it seems to throw this error. So be aware of that. Maybe it's a different RepRap version we need to go to. But just when editing that file, sometimes it was giving me problems. But I wanted to show you that just in case you see that as well. So I'll just jump over to Edge real quick. Back into Settings, System Editor, config.g. We'll just make sure that our M552S1 has been saved. We took the semicolon off of that. We're good there. Scroll all the way to the bottom. This M918 command is what turns on or off your default screen. So we'll just take the semicolon off of that. You can select which screen you have. He has it in the comments out here. For a regular RepRap screen, you do -4. And for the CR10 Ender 3 type screen, you do just a regular E4. And just taking a look at the config.g file a little further, you can set either 0 or 1 for PWM, so you could control these thermostatically. So if you wanted to move that other fan, the Hotends fan, over to these pins with that JST connector, you could set that up so that it wouldn't kick on until it reached a certain temperature. So we should be good. Let's go ahead and hit save. Do we want to reload? Yes, this will reboot the Duet board. And now we have our default screen all set up. Ignore mine, it's all messed up where you can't see some of the lines, but that's all the screen's fault. But now you can move around in the RepRap firmware on the screen. If we go to heat, you can turn on and off your heaters. We'll go back, you can move around. If you're used to RepRap and you've seen these menus before, then you'll know how to use them. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but not that big of a deal. So there was just a little bit of setup I had to do to get it to work with my Ender 3, but that's probably mostly because I got a really early version of this board. Hopefully all the other boards are going to be plug and play, and they'll just work with the default screen. Now you are always going to have to set up your wireless interface because everyone's Wi-Fi network is going to be different. And now is a great time to mention that you don't just have to use it on an Ender 3. It's a good replacement for any of the Creality machines that use this same style of board, and a good board to use on any machine if you want to try out Duet, because it's a lot more cost effective. But there's one more feature that Duet brings that will take your Ender 3 way over the top, and that is the Paneldue Touchscreen. It's compatible directly with this board. The Paneldue screens, you can get them in a 5-inch or 7-inch. This is a 5. If you take a look at the back, the new screens are actually integrated. They don't have these modules on them anymore, but this isn't the Duet module. This is a module created by Panucatt. It works better with the Ender 3 setup. It doesn't hang off the side like the original module does, but this board still is compatible with any of the newer versions of the Paneldue screens. Just be aware of that. These modules will be for sale at some time on the Panucatt website if you want to add it to your existing Paneldue. And hooking up the Paneldue to this board is pretty straightforward. We're going to use the AUX pins. So we're just going to use this long DuPont cable. It has 4 wires on each side. On the Paneldue side, we'll hook it up right here. So we've got yellow on 5, white on ground, transmit is green, blue is receive. And then on the printer side, you can go ahead and unhook your ribbon cable if you like, or you can just leave it there, whichever you want to do, but we're not going to use that for our screen any longer. And we're going to use these aux pins right over here. You can see we have 5-volt, ground, receive, and transmit. Transmit does go to receive does go to transmit when you're using these devices, but these pins have already been flip-flopped, so you don't have to flip your wires. On the screen it's transmit receive, on the board it's receive transmit. So that's pretty handy. So the other side of our DuPont connection will go right in like that. 5-volt, ground, receive, transmit. Also, while we're in here, underneath this Wi-Fi module, there's a little metal switch. By default, it is set to aux. Just make sure it's set to aux or these connections won't work. Then we'll just mount our screen up with our stock Ender 3 hardware. We can power on. Our Paneldue is connected. It's telling us what IP we have, and we're ready to go. Now, a side tip, if your Paneldue doesn't connect up, no matter what board you're using, make sure you're on the right baud rate. Go into Setup. The default baud rate on Duet is 57.6, so make sure that's corrected. And you should be good to go. Pretty much everything that's in the web UI is available right here on the panel. And of course, I think the coolest thing is you can go to the console and you can pull up a keyboard and you can punch in G-code commands right here. How cool is that? You officially now have the coolest Ender 3 on the block. The only downside to this is you can't use the SD card on the back of the Paneldue. We currently don't have connections set up for that. We could probably find some pins that would work, but it's really not that big a deal because you can use your onboard SD card. That SD card, the one that holds the web UI, will also hold your G-code files. And it probably transfers to that card a lot faster than it would over this transmit-receive set of pins. And while we're on that subject, if you saw the last video where we were messing around with Wi-Fi and we have that ESP8266 module, files upload ridiculously slow. Well, that's not a problem with Duet. You can go to G-code files, hit upload G-code files, and just grab whichever G-code you want. From our last video, this was our mount. You don't have the file limitations either, so you can do any one you like. This one is 940K. Hit open, and it just uploaded that in real time. Just takes a couple of seconds. So everything is ready to go. Let's go ahead and preheat. And we're going to slice our Benchy here in Prusa Slicer, but fun fact, if you go to printer settings, you can select Duet right here and send files directly to your Duet board. Just enter your IP, 192.168.1.56. You can hit save, go back to platter, we'll slice, and you can send G-code. And then over here on our Duet, we now have our Benchy file. And one last thing here before we get going on a print, you'll notice I didn't put any heat sinks on those stepper drivers. This is a fairly thick PCB, and you do have this fan on your Ender 3. By the way, that goes in the case fan spot right here. So you probably wouldn't need a heatsink, but it never hurts to have one. So I am going to go ahead and add a heatsink to the top of each one of those 2209s. I also heard that they were going to be adding sensorless homing to be compatible with this board very soon, so be on the lookout for that. Heatsinks are on, case fans plugged in. Let's go ahead and close up shop. So just for fun, let's start our print from our Paneldue. We'll just go to the SD card, we'll get our Benchy file, and we'll hit print. And we're off and printing. Now I did notice that these stepper drivers are a little bit noisier than other 2209s that I've heard, but that might be related to some sort of chopper timing or a voltage setting. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to investigate that to see what's going on. I might just need a firmware upgrade. There are a couple of guides out there for Duet for tuning things like this, so I'll definitely have to read up. And we're on the second layer, and I did verify that our part fan kicked on, so we definitely have it plugged into the right location. We should be all set. And there it is. The Panucatt Kinetica G2-C install is now complete. There is one more thing we have to discuss, and that is the price. This board is $80 US, and that might seem kind of high compared to a lot of the SKR boards that are out there at around $25 to $30. But you have to remember, on a Panucatt board, you're going to get a lot higher component installed on that board, and that will lead to more reliability over time. Also, you get to try out the Duet RepRap ecosystem if you haven't before. It is a pretty cool interface that you get with that DWC controller. It's almost as good as Octoprint in my opinion, and you get to do it at a lower price than something like a Duet Wi-Fi or a Duet Maestro. And speaking of Octoprint, with this setup, you don't have to add added Wi-Fi connections, like a Raspberry Pi. So that would save you some money as well. And it's an almost direct drop-in replacement for a lot of Creality machines. You will have to tweak a few things here and there, but you do have the option of adding really fancy things like the Paneldue. I probably don't suggest that, but if that's something you want on your printer, you have that option. All things to consider when buying a new board. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to my channel. If not, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.